In January 2015, prime contractor regulations were put into effect in Saskatchewan. With prime contractor, the responsibility overview is the coordination of safety is essential when with multiple trades on site. The prime contractor gets all parties involved on the same page and ensures that the hazards on the site and the hazards associated to the activities of the site are being dealt with and coordinated between all parties. The owner has the overall responsibility of health and safety on the work site, and the prime contractor allows the project owner the opportunity to transfer most of their health and safety responsibilities to that third party. So the regulations in regard to prime contractor is to ensure that every work site has a party that will take an overall role in health and safety. So if we look at a story out of Manitoba, okay, so in April 2011, there was a fatality at a generator plant near Thompson, Manitoba. In 2014, the project owner was fined over $180,000 for the avoidable death of a 66-year-old man that was actually set to retire in just 13 days. It was a short-term job of dismantling a large Quonset used to produce cement. The worker was killed instantly when he was struck by a large metal rod. According to the reports by Manitoba's Crown Attorney, stated that a loader was dismantling a large tent panel when the fabric ripped and a 10-foot metal rod was sent hurling towards the worker, striking him in the head. The project owner failed to ensure that the hazards were identified, communicated, and controlled. In addition, they failed to ensure that there was a safe work procedure for the dismantling of the Quonset. The fine was the largest kind imposed in Manitoba and related directly to prime contractor duties. On a project, both the owner and the contractor have responsibilities. The owner has the duty to ensure that their workplace complies with legislation, the site is maintained, and that it does not endanger the health and safety of anybody. Besides the owner, the contractor is responsible for safety as well. They have the highest level of responsibility to ensure that the work site and all the work that happens is done safely. This is fairly straightforward. Contractors set the minimum standard for the site, everyone follows the law, but we must never fall below the site minimum standards or the regulatorily minimum standards as well. In Saskatchewan, the Employment Act talks about general duties of a prime contractor. Like I stated earlier, on January 1st, 2015, prime contractor regulations were added to the back of the Saskatchewan Employment Acts and Regulations, becoming effective in law. The prime contractor regulations did get their own blue pages as well. These regulations lay out specifically when a prime contractor is needed and the authority of the prime. It also details the expectations of owners, employers, self-employed persons, prime contractors, and the specific activities that each workplace group shall perform. Due to the hazardous nature of three industries in Saskatchewan, prime contractor applies strictly to the oil and gas industry, the forestry industry, and finally the construction industry. This does include all multi-employer industrial, commercial, and residential projects with one exception. Construction industry does not include activities or operations undertaken by a person in connection with construction or renovation if the worksite has dwellings that are less than 4 units. It is important to realize the definition of construction means the erection, altercation, renovation, repair, dismantle, demolition, structural maintenance, and painting of a structure. And this also includes land clearing, earth moving, grading, excavating, trenching, digging, boring, drilling, blasting, and concreting, and the installation of any plant. In the construction industry, there will be some multi-employer worksites that do not require a prime contractor. For example, a single home construction or renovation regardless on number of contractors. So as you can see in these pictures, that is a single home dwelling meant for one family. Here's a large multi-employer single unit dwelling. This is TV celebrity Drake's house under construction, large in size and scope than many commercial developments. And on this site today, we have 1 general, 5 contractors, and 30 workers. In this situation, prime is not required as this is a residential construction work site. as a single dwelling. Keep in mind that the acts and regulations are a minimum standard, and a job of this size would greatly benefit from the use of a prime contractor. But like I stated, the owner and contractor in this situation still have the requirements for safety on this site. Here we have a residential development. There are 8 separate lots with single detached homes on each side. Built by one general contractor, all the homes are being built at the same time and are at different levels of completion. The general contractor also has a job trailer across the street. At any given time on this site, there is one general contractor, 5 subtrades, and 30 workers. In this situation, there is no prime needed as each work site consists of a single unit dwelling. However, the Saskatchewan Employment Act does still put an onus on the contractor to provide a safe work site. In this scenario, we have a residential development that is 1 unit with 4 dwellings. Each dwelling is a different level of completion. This is a fourplex that is individually titled lots with fences and distinct property lines of separating ownership. The only difference between this work site and the last one we just went over is the aspect of shared walls. Again, here we have 1 general, 5 subtrades, and 30 workers. Because of the unit, this unit is a four dwellings and is 1 work site. Due to the shared walls and roofs, a prime contractor would be needed. Prime contractor regulations state that the only exclusion is a unit that has 3 or less dwellings. This unit does have 4 dwellings. This is the most interesting scenarios of all residential, is the residential gated community. Okay, so here we have a multiplex and triplex homes built in one location. All these homes share a main address with separate addresses inside the gated community. Here we have one owner that hired 1 general contractor with 5 subtrades and 30 workers on site. So if you've been following along, all the scenarios have had 1 general, 5 subtrades, and 30 workers. So here there's 13 buildings. 12 of them are being residential duplexes, and across the street is 1 small commercial space building. Is prime required? No, because none of the work sites, none of the 12 work sites have over 3 dwellings. This would be different, of course, if any of these duplexes had basement suites. Then that would make them essentially a fourplex. In this example, there's no basement suites. Here, there's a lot going on sites like the shared roadways and shared access gates and routes. This would all come into play if this was tested in courts. So let's say we decide no prime is needed, and as an owner, I'm not assigning a prime for this project. What about the construction of the small commercial building? Here, if there were 2 employers and 10 or more workers engaged on that work site, then yes, it would fit the requirements of that specific building. Here we have a commercial example. So here there is 1 owner having a shopping mall built, and he hires 3 surveyors. At this point, prime contractor does not apply. But if the owner hires a general contractor to oversee the project and the general contractor arrives when the surveyors are still on site, prime contractor regulations would apply, making the owner automatically the prime contractor. Now that we've reviewed which projects need a prime and which do not, the project owner is the one to decide who they will proceed with the project and who will be managing certain aspects. Now let's look at the owner's duties. The owner is going to appoint a prime contractor, complete this with a written agreement contract, and comply with the prime contractor's directions. Once the owner chooses a prime contractor, they are legally responsible to that prime moving forward. It is important that as an owner, we consider a few aspects when choosing the right prime contractor. So first, we're going to look at knowledge. Do they understand applicable regulations? Are they experienced as a prime? So you might want to do a background check, refer to references, things like that. Do they have the experience to identify the best equipment, people for the project, and understanding the physical environment of the workplace, and training? What training have they received to do their job competently? The capacity, do they have the time? Their HR resources, are they capable of hiring, firing, dealing with orientations, things like that? Subcontractors, do they know and how to deal with and delegate work to other subcontractors? The contractor must have time and resources to accomplish their requirements. This is an important one to think about before the agreement is contracted and signed. The contractor must be able to find a balance between meeting their prime contractor responsibilities and the other parts of their businesses like quality and production. The owner would need to confirm that the prime has a plan in place to manage functions and competent people to manage safety. And then we look at control. Prime must have the cooperation and support of the other employers on site. This includes resolving any safety infractions that occur, have the authority to enforce safety rules and procedures, and be able to engage the owner to solve problems if necessary. If one of these three key elements is missing, the contractor may not be able to act as prime contractor. The two groups should work together to find a solution on how the contractor can get the knowledge, capacity, and control to successfully do the job. If a solution is not found, the responsibility of coordinating the safety activities would go back on the owner. So now the project owner has decided to delegate a prime contractor to their upcoming project. This needs to be more than a mere handshake or verbal agreement. Legislation states that this must be a written contract, something the owner should consider. Does the contract lay out specific expectations and responsibilities of the prime? This is a critical document to make sure that the owner has all information when hiring the competent prime contractor. This visual explains the flow of responsibilities ranked from top and of the highest degree of control. Keep in mind, this is just an example and may not fit some scenarios. As a safety coordinator position, they also have a significant role in the health and safety on a work site. A qualified safety coordinator hired by the prime contractor coordinates health and safety of the entire workplace and also oversees activities ensuring everyone is following proper health and safety protocol on the site. The prime contractor must do their due diligence to ensure the safety coordinator is competent for that position. The role of a safety coordinator informs contractors, subcontractors, and workers of known hazards on the site. They ensure all hazards are addressed throughout the duration of the work activities. So in summary, looking at this chart, the owner owns the property, plant, and equipment used for the site. The prime contractor also signs an agreement, but the agreement is much more detailed with more duties assigned. They coordinate the safety of the worksite, ensuring compliance with health and safety legislation. Then the safety would coordinate all aspects of safety from there, moving the chain of command down to the contractors, and then the contractors will delegate to their subcontractors. Once the contract is signed, the owner is not completely off the hook and may not want to be for two reasons. One, the cost, delays, and safety mishaps are definitely concerns of the owner moving forward. No matter how you look at this is the owner's worksite and it demands that the owner stays engaged. They may be called upon to advise on matters that can only be answered by the owner. Two, no matter how tight the contract details are in delegating the responsibilities of safety of prime contractor, the owner will always have continued responsibility to ensure that the prime is fulfilling their contract. The owner may want to periodically evaluate them and monitor the prime contractor's performance through reviewing of documentation. We have already discussed the importance of having knowledge, capacity, and control necessary to do the work. A few very important things that will assess the prime in doing their day-to-day operations on site. Healthy communication is going to be the most important aspect of a productive job site. The prime contractor is required to post their names and contact information on site so they can be easily contacted when needed. Know who the designated supervisors are for each company working on site so that any safety related communication can be done through the prime contractor and the employer's supervisors. Supervisors ensure their workforce is informed. It is extremely important to not forget about the short-term workers like your suppliers or specialty trades. If there are any self-employed people working on site like your truck drivers or equipment operators, they also need to be engaged in prime. Along with the contact between supervisors, establishing a joint OHC may be an effective way of communicating on a larger worksite with multiple employers. No matter how it is accomplished, it will be important that open lines of communication exist in the duration of the project. The regulations state that the prime must post their name and a method to contact them in a highly visible location at the entrance of the site, as well as the individual that is overseeing the activities of the employers, workers, and subcontractors. The prime contractor must also ensure that all activities are conducted in a safe and healthy manner, and that all employers and subcontractors have the appropriate policies, procedures, practices, equipment, competent workers, and information in place before the workforce begins working on site. They also need to make sure that all employers have adequate and appropriate policies, procedures, and safe work practice equipment, competent personnel, and any other information to ensure that they're equipped to work safely. The prime contractor must prepare a project-specific safety plan that establishes how they will fulfill their role. This written plan will be shared with all parties involved on the worksite. It sets up the project for success, successfully managing all matters in relation to health and safety, and must contain adequate details to accomplish this. Once the project is underway, prime contractor is responsible for the ongoing identification and control of hazards, but also for investigating any safety concerns brought to their attention. As the prime contractor, you have the authority and are required to make the necessary decisions regarding the coordination of activities that affect safety. For difficult decisions, it may be necessary to consult with the employers and workers on site to get their information. Now that we've spoken about owner and prime contractor, the other piece of the puzzle is the workforce. As a contractor or employer working on a site with a prime contractor, it is important that we understand some things. We recognize the authority from the prime contractor. We provide owner or prime contractor with all requested information, comply with prime contractor directions, communicate your work activities, and provide contact information of a competent site supervisor. The prime contractor is legally obligated to make sure that you work safe and that your work activities do not cause potential harm to others on the site. Here are a few things to keep in mind. The prime contractor has been tasked to coordinate safety on site. As long as the prime directions is reasonable, then the employer must comply. The prime is going to need you to provide information about your staff and work activities. This will be done prior to work beginning and during the project as needed. Open lines of communication are going to ensure that everyone is on the same page. Each employer or self-employed person will provide a name of a contact supervisor and contact information to the prime. The employer's assigned supervisor will be the person that is engaged when any safety-related communication is needed. Everyone on site must work together to ensure that the site can be coordinated safely and that hazards are dealt with. This person needs to be available for the prime when needed. This establishes the supervisor as the main contact for information. The prime communicates to the supervisor to reach the crews. When an employer's crew member on site has a safety-related issue, they will communicate this to their supervisor, and then the supervisor will then take their concerns to the prime contractor to be rectified. This makes the prime contractor's ability to engage all parties on site achievable. It is going to be the employer's responsibility to provide a competent supervisor. In establishing their competency, the employer will ensure that the supervisors know how to fulfill their role on site. They will be required to understand and enforce legislation and site-specific requirements. So in summary, when is it necessary to have a prime contractor? In the oil and gas industry, in the forestry industry, and finally in the construction industry, 2 or more employers or subcontractors engaged with 10 or more workers or self-employed people on site. And like I said, any dwelling units of 4 or more. Owners are automatically designated prime when necessary, or they can assign prime contractor responsibilities to another party through a contract. Prime contractor responsibilities, they need to establish a plan, keep open lines of communication, mitigate hazards, and then the owner is going to relieve the prime in writing when duties are finished. Our ability to provide due diligence and ensure that our project-specific safety plan is being executed may come down to the collection of documentation. It is going to be very helpful to use consistent forms and system to help stay organized. Share the documentation with those on the worksite, ensuring not to forget the smaller subcontractors. The prime will need to establish a system to show that they are managing their roles effectively. As part of the owner system to monitor and evaluate the subcontractor, they may require to see documentation. This documentation must be available to any authority. Again, thank you to Joanne and Mike for helping me put this presentation together, as well as the whole advisory team for their input. Thanks, guys.